Empires build monuments to power, arches, palaces, laws. But behind every empire's glory lies a darker record of crimes, punishments, and control. Because in the ancient world, justice was never about fairness. It was about survival and fear. Tonight, we're digging beneath the marble and gold to expose how the world's earliest civilizations punished those who defied their order, and how that punishment became a tool of domination. From Mesopotamia to Egypt, from Athens to Rome, from imperial China to the farthest reaches of ancient kingdoms, every empire faced the same question. How do you keep millions obedient? The answer was simple. Make examples of the disobedient. Laws were written in stone, and punishments were written on flesh. In the dusty heart of Mesopotamia, the first legal code stood tall. The Code of Hammurabi. Carved into black basalt, it declared, to cause justice to prevail in the land, to destroy the wicked. But justice here was no equal scale. It was hierarchy disguised as order. Strike a noble, pay a fine. Strike a commoner, lose a limb. Steal a loaf of bread, lose your hand. To the king, this was logic. To the punished, it was terror, sanctified by law. Hammurabi's empire didn't seek compassion. It sought obedience. Every broken bone, every missing hand, reminded the people who ruled them. Travel down the Nile, and the concept of justice becomes divine. The pharaoh wasn't just a ruler. He was the living embodiment of Ma'at, the balance of the universe. So when you broke the law, you weren't just offending the state. You were offending the cosmos itself. Tomb robbing, blasphemy, or theft of temple goods were seen as crimes against eternity. The punishment? Brutal and public. Hands cut off, faces branded, families enslaved. But make no mistake, punishment in Egypt wasn't only about morality. It was about keeping the people afraid to question divine order. Faith and fear, the twin pillars of Pharaoh's power. Then came Athens, the birthplace of democracy, or so they say. Here the law took a new form, the theater of justice. Juries of hundreds gathered in the open air, listening not to evidence, but to eloquence. Your fate could depend on how well you spoke, or how well someone spoke against you. A citizen could be exiled for 10 years simply because his peers feared his influence. It was called ostracism, the clean word for social execution. Public shaming was common. Death sentences were delivered by vote, not verdict. And while Athens prided itself on freedom, remember this: only male citizens had rights. Women, foreigners, slaves, they were property. Democracy, but only for the chosen. Then came the empire that turned punishment into performance: Rome. Here, law and spectacle were inseparable. Criminals were paraded before the mob, condemned in public, and executed as entertainment. The Colosseum wasn't just for sport. It was the empire's loudest warning. For slaves, punishment meant crucifixion, burning, or death by beasts. For nobles, it meant exile or a polite suicide to preserve honor. Different laws, same goal: preserve hierarchy. Rome perfected the illusion of justice. Written laws, detailed codes, endless bureaucracy, all to disguise the raw power underneath. Justice was a costume. The sword was real. In imperial China, the system was built on Confucian ideals: harmony, morality, hierarchy. But the reality was discipline through terror. Crimes weren't just individual sins, they were family failures. If one person rebelled, 10 could suffer. Collective punishment ensured that fear spread faster than crime. Public beatings, forced tattoos, exile to labor camps, these were tools to restore order. Even moral teaching was backed by physical pain. It was control masquerading as virtue, and it worked for centuries. Every empire had a red line you couldn't cross. Not stealing, not murder, but questioning authority. Rebels, prophets, heretics, they faced punishments meant not just to destroy them, but to erase them. In Rome, rebellion was crushed with extermination. Families executed, names removed from records, memories forbidden. In Egypt, heretics were branded blasphemers and erased from monuments. In China, dissidents were silenced under the weight of moral re-education. When rulers spoke of peace, what they really meant was silence. Public punishment wasn't random cruelty. It was psychological engineering. Empires learned that the more visible the pain, the less likely others would rebel. Executions were ceremonies. Whippings were announcements. The point wasn't justice, it was dominance. The body of the criminal became the empire's message board. Every scar said, "This is what happens when you forget who rules you." Humiliation was often worse than death, because when you stripped someone's dignity, you didn't just kill the person. You erased the idea that resistance was possible. Not every ruler delighted in blood. Some saw cruelty as bad politics. Reforms came slowly. Appeals, fines instead of mutilation, imprisonment instead of execution. But even these reforms weren't about compassion. They were about efficiency. A slave can't work if he's dead. A taxpayer can't pay if he's maimed. Mercy was often just economics in disguise. Empires adjusted their punishments the same way they adjusted taxes, when it suited them. And yet, if you look closely, the shadows of those old systems are still here. Public punishment may have moved from the square to the screen, but the logic hasn't changed. We still use fear to enforce order. We still decide whose pain is visible and whose isn't. We still call control justice. The faces change, the tools evolve, but the empire's instinct to dominate through law remains. Crime and punishment in ancient times were never just about morality. They were instruments of rule, the iron heartbeat of empire. Behind every shining monument, there was a dungeon. Behind every code of law, there was a king's fear of losing power. The stones remember the rulers, but the soil remembers the punished. And if you listen closely, you can still hear the echoes of their chains. If you liked this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing videos.